Dr. and thank you, Dr. Glynn and Professor Nolan, for coming today, but also for all the work you're doing day in, day out to try and keep the country safe. It's very much appreciated. You have the toughest job in the country, and it's not going unnoticed. Just my first question to Dr. Glynn. I've been in regular communication with my colleague Mark Wall and indeed residents from Kildare, and would there be can you envisage any scenario over the next couple of days if the numbers continue to go down in Kildare that prior to this weekend that perhaps there could be a restriction in the lifting of the restrictions in Kildare if the numbers continue to go down? I understand there was 5 new cases yesterday. Can you envisage any that happening, or will we be going to the 6th of September?
So I think we indicated last week that we would keep it under review, and we will keep it under review. And if a point comes where we feel we can lift them, we certainly will lift them. We're fully cognizant of the impact of these measures, and I, for one, what we really want to do is get Kildare back aligned with the rest of the country. So we have one set of measures for the country as a whole, with one set of messages that everyone can adhere to nationally, with a common set of aims and objectives. So as soon as we can, we will. Thank you.
Dr. Glynn, you said recently, and Paul Reid said it in the first session this morning, we're going to be living with this virus for a time to come, and we're going to have to come to terms with how we're going to deal with that. So what work is NPHET doing in relation to air travel and the restrictions around that at the moment? And I'm speaking from someone who represents a constituency with an awful lot of airport workers who are very fearful of their jobs. And I suppose what came to light this week in the public consciousness is that if you travel into the country, even if you have a negative test, you still have to restrict your movements. So for 14 days. So, where do we go from here? Because it's unsustainable. What kind of systems can be brought in place to bring travel back to some kind of normality? And what, can you give any kind of hope to the industry in that regard?
So, conscious always that I speak on behalf of NPHET, and we have a particular lens through which we view these things, and fully accepting of the fact that government need to make decisions based on a wider set of priorities. But from my perspective, I don't see a scenario where we will have widespread travel over the coming months. Of course, NPHET will continue to evolve and look at the situation, and we are looking at the situation. But over the past 14 days alone, we've had 69 travel-related cases in this country, and every one of those cases can lead to further cases. So for now, unfortunately, our message remains the same, and I know it's not a message that people will welcome or want to hear, but it does remain the same, that everyone should avoid non-essential travel.
Are the calls that I and others have been making over the last number of months for testing at the airport or at our ports, if that was implemented, is that useful in any way in changing the advice, or are you just as well getting a test at a local test centre as opposed to the airport?
So I might let Professor Nolan come in here, if that's okay.
So the test we have is an excellent diagnostic test when used under clinical supervision, where you have a high suspicion that somebody has the disease. So there's a 1 in 100 chance or a 1 in 500 chance that they have the disease. When you get down to screening, it's a very poor test. It's going to miss a lot of cases. It's going to come up with a lot of false positives if there's only a 1 in 20,000 chance or a 1 in 10,000 chance that the person has the disease. So what this shows is the limitations of testing. A negative test doesn't necessarily prove you don't have the disease. And if the risk is low, sometimes a positive test can be false. So we need better testing technologies and better testing regimens. But certainly from the research and the literature and what we know, strict self-isolation or restricted movements is always going to be a part of a travel regimen. That's what protects from the spread of the disease. So we may be able to improve testing regimens that can shorten that time or change the nature of that time. But I think realistically, in the long term, we're going to be living with restrictions on movement, perhaps alleviated somewhat by a better testing regimen. But right now, we're not in that place.
Okay. Just one more question, if I can squeeze it in. Are NEFIT aware or have any understanding in terms of the worries of a lot of pregnant women are having in terms of the messaging and the public health advice messaging in relation to COVID and the impact it has on women in pregnancy?
We are absolutely aware of that. I mean, there's no sector, there's no group that hasn't been impacted by this, and I know in particular that maternity hospitals have had to bring in measures that have significantly impacted on the experience of pregnant women and their partners. Of course, we're conscious of it, and again, but the key to alleviating the impact on pregnant women or any other group in our society is for everyone to do their bit to keep this low. The lower we can keep this disease in our society, the greater the level of freedom that we can all enjoy, and hopefully the less the level of worry and anxiety that will pervade amongst us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.